This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I will plead with everyone to mute his microphone for now. Are we good? Okay. So if you have something to say, please, you can just put it down on the chat so that we will read and give you the permission to talk when necessary. I hope we understand very well. So it's 1 minute past 3 p.m. and I think it's time we start the webinar. So welcome everyone to the YALDA August 17 webinar 2019. We apologize because 2 weeks ago we had some technical issues connecting, but everything has been sorted out and today we proceed full-fledged. So welcome to everyone all over the globe. I am Ines Chakunte and I'll be coordinating the webinar. I am the Assistant Executive Director for YALDA Cameroon. We all know the theme is transforming education and the webinar goes alongside with the celebration of the World Youth Day. As speakers, we have Mr. Hansel Tante from Cameroon, Ms. Rutendo Raquel Chilengi from the Zambia. We have Mr. Hassan Ali Ghazali from Egypt and Mrs. Malika Lazri Lalu from South Africa. So they're going to be sharing their wonderful experiences with us while we listen carefully. And at the end of the session, everyone will be given the chance to ask a question. Like I said, if you have anything to say, you can put it down in the chat right now, and we shall read and give you the permission to talk if necessary. So please, guys, receive apologies from two speakers who are going to be running late due to some unforeseen conditions, Hansel Tante from Cameroon and Hassan Ali Ghazali from Egypt, but they'll be joining us soon. So we will start with Ms. Raquel Chilengi Rutendo and Mrs. Malika Lazri. So I'll give the floor to Ms. Raquel to present herself. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. And once again, thank you so much for this honorable opportunity to be able to participate in this year's Youth Day theme, and most especially on this platform. So, as already introduced, my name is Rutendo Rachel Chilengi. I'm from Zambia. I'm a policy analyst and also an alumni to the African Union Youth Volunteer Corps, to which I served at the African Union in Ethiopia for 1 year, 6 months, and currently serving as the Africa Youth Union Commission Secretary General of the Southern African chapters. My contribution to this platform mainly comes from my personal experience with having to work across the continent in different communities in advocating, lobbying, and also fostering the SDG number 4 that looks at quality education for long life learning, and also my own experience with working in the Ministry of Youth on issues of education and community empowerment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Raquel. Um, Hello, Mrs. Malika. Can we hear from you, your presentation?
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity of contributing to today's webinar. And my name is Malika Lasri, and I'm from Casablanca, Morocco. I work for the African Leadership Group that counts African Leadership Academy in Johannesburg, African Leadership University in Mauritius and Rwanda, and African Leadership Experience in Kenya that's expanding to other African country. Maybe I will get the opportunity to present a little bit more what we do. My contribution is to two subjects. One of them is leadership, how to grow leaders in Africa through the education system. And the second one is how to actually develop a new model that fits today's constraints and opportunities, and also allows to solve some of the challenges or the constraints that the education system is suffering from. I also have like 25 years of experience in international development, and mainly fighting poverty through economic growth. So education is the basis of growing capital, developing capital, but it's very much also linked to economic growth, as it allows to have jobs and allows young people to access employment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Miss Malika. So we're going to just move straight to the detail and the core of the webinar. So I'll just have the first question for both speakers. I will start with Miss Raquel. So the UN International Youth Day was celebrated on 12 August with the theme Transforming Education. In what ways do you think youth across various continents, and in particular African youth, can contribute in developing and taking ownership of an all-inclusive educational policy that addresses societal challenges? Of course, given the emergency of technology. So we'll start with Ms. Raquel. What do you think about this?
Thank you very much for offering me the floor. With regards to that question, having been an advocate for Agenda 2063, for me, the key question that I ask not only to policymakers but also to young people as we work around championing the agenda and also the other SDG goals is mainly to say what kind of a youthful society do we want to see come 2063. With that said, I would also like to put the table to say in addressing this challenge of youth engaging and contributing to the harnessing of technology and dealing with the technological challenges that we're faced with, it's important to know that as young people, we are not only the leaders of the future, but leaders of right now. And across the continent of Africa, we are the number one consumers and users of the technological spaces such as the internet today. And with that said, it's very important that as policymakers we're able to identify the challenges that we communities are faced with when it comes to accessing and contributing to technology, among which would be a large a large gap that exists between those that have access to the to this technological information and those that don't. A large majority of African countries today are still facing a big challenge of access to the internet, which happens to be the bedrock of technological advancements today, offering not only information and opportunities, but also offering a space of to which the youth are able to be productive. I would like to support this argument with a study that was carried out by the After Access Report organization that carried out a survey in 2017 looking at countries, African countries and their use to the internet and even just the accessibility to a mobile phone that today is used as the most affordable source to technological advancements. So based on the survey carried out in 2017, the number of the percent of people who had access to mobile phones in Kenya was at 78%. And when the study was carried out in South Africa, it was 84%. In Ghana, 74%. In Nigeria, only 64% had access to mobile phones, and in Tanzania was at 59%. Rwanda being at 48, and Mozambique having the lowest at 40%. And when a study was carried out to say how many of these very same countries have access to internet, Tanzania was at 14%, Mozambique at 10%, Kenya was at 26%, Rwanda 8%, South Africa at 50%, Ghana was at 26%, Nigeria at 30%. So the issue now comes to how are we using these spaces to contribute to the social, uh, to deal with the challenges of technology and also enhancing the form of education that we have, and how we are growing outside the formal space of education to using the informal spaces and social spaces that places like the internet offer to us. Was quite unfortunate in the sense that when the same report covered to say how are these countries using the internet for spaces of education. The results were quite low, with countries like Tanzania not being able to even score any percentage on the use of internet for educational purposes. Mozambique was at 27%, Kenya was at 16, Rwanda could not did not score anything, South Africa was at 11%, Ghana was at 49%, and Nigeria was at 33%. And when you compare these to the readings of how the internet is being used in these very same countries for just social media, it's quite disheartening. With you see countries like Nigeria scoring at 30%, uh, Ghana at 27%, South Africa at 42%, compared to an 11%, which was that for education. Rwanda, which did not score anything in the space of education, yet scored a 6% for social media. Kenya was at 27% in social media, while in the spaces of education was at 16%. Tanzania was at 12% social media, and education did not score anything. It's very alarming to say that we need to look into ways of better advocating and teaching digital education to our youth on how they can use these spaces not only for entertainment but also be able to use them for productive activities, such as coming up with projects that are community oriented, that spearhead the use of technology in the community, in the basic spaces. On the same note, when you look at the way most African schools are set up today, basic government schools, very few of them have access to computers. And this has been a huge challenge in incorporating the ICT skills in our communities at a grass level. Furthermore, to say, most of these schools do not even have a consistent supply of internet. So, as much as you might have a class taking computer studies, all these students are taught at the basic operations of a computer. They are not efficiently taught how to use the internet to come up with creative ideas, to identify certain uh, opportunities that they might need to better enhance their space of technological advancements as students within the education system as it is today. Another key challenge is also on the aspect of equipping our teachers on how best they could be able to incorporate the technological skills into in the different subjects that are taught today. Because truth of the matter is the world is evolving around us, that to the space in which even what we would have known to say human social studies subjects are now incorporating the ICT within them. One can be able to be a lawyer in one country and yet represent client in another country using the technological spaces. So we need to also see how we can then incorporate these technological skills within our education system, that even when the students and the youth leave their formal classroom setting, they're able to carry out their skills and knowledge to also contribute to their environment outside. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Raquel. I hope we are all focusing and concentrating because what she says actually makes a lot of sense. So shame on anyone who is actually distracted. So Ms. Malika Nazri, what is your own opinion of the subject?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Yes,
hear
I'm
you.
hearing you. My name is
Oh,
Masu Taiwo.
thank you. So
Yeah.
if I understood well, the
So,
question says, in what way African youth can contribute in developing and taking ownership of an all-inclusive education policy that addresses social challenges, given also the emergence of technology. So I'm not sure I am aligned with what I have said before, but maybe I can bring in complementary information according with of what I know is if we talk first about what is all-inclusive education policies and what are the problems that actually make it hard on different students to enroll, knowing that globally, Africa is home to more than half of out of school children, for example, in primary age 6 to 11, one third of adolescents of lower secondary age, and more than half of youth of upper secondary age, 15 to 17, are not in school. And survey, like for example, in Morocco, even it says 14 million people today are not working and not looking for work, are not in school. And it's the the triple N, none of none of no occupation, not in school, not at work. So some of the reasons would be like there's poor infrastructure, especially low quality of education. These have been identified as really important barriers for that. But also class sizes. We have in Morocco, for example, classes that go up to 50, 60 students in primary schools. No textbooks. Some parents get a chance to make photocopies, but others would just share textbooks with each other. Um, if some of the other problems are related also to the quality of teachers. Going to teaching, for example, as a profession here, says it's someone who did fail in getting to med school, law school, engineering school, and teaching is like the least. It's a tag of failure. Someone becoming a teacher, especially in primary, secondary school, is someone who actually had no other choices of doing anything better, and does only so he or she goes into teaching with depression, with the feeling of having failed in the society and in school, and not really motivated, given also the low salaries, to really teach and involve students and make them part of their own learning experience. So teacher being the cornerstone of the quality of education, not being able to deliver at that level also is one of the reasons why students leave, drop out, or don't even go to school.
True.
Out of 100 students who go into primary school here in Morocco, only 10 of them make it to high school. So that's and a lot of it is actually due to what I have said. In addition, for girls, when we focus on girls' education, we have the availability of sanitation facilities, toilets to be basic, if they're not available, parents do not send their kids, their daughters to school. And there's also the way that some of the rural area is designed, villages. So instead, because there are a multitude of small, very small villages, instead of building a school in each village, the government chooses to build a school in the middle of the crossroad of 5, 6, 7 villages. And every kid has to walk at least 3 to 5 kilometers to get to school in the morning and come back in the evening, just walking. Now some of the buses led by initiatives from young people or associations are actually providing the service. But just going back again to how young people can own or youth can own a little bit some of these solutions to all-inclusive education is through the associations they have, is owning their own journey of educating. If I can just say a little bit how we do it at the African Leadership Academy. One of the criteria to selecting the students to get into ALA is to see what their mission is, how they identify to any of the challenges that their community is having, their country or their continent. And then studying that and seeing that they have a mission, not just looking for a major or a diploma, but having a goal to actually impact their environment, be it big or small. This is the basic how we select them, and they integrate the programs and we work with them based on project learning, which the first thing they're taught is learn how to learn themselves. Nowadays, technology made it really easy to have content in internet. You go into Google and then you have immensely oceans of knowledge. What is missing is skills. And the way skills are taught is by practice. So project. This is how their knowledge and then their skills are built in these areas. And this all is based on a survey of the competencies that the workplace is looking for, be it for entrepreneurship or be it to work as an employee. Critical reasoning is very important. Leading self is very important. Leading others is very important. Data and decision or decision making based on data and evidence is very important. So this is so youth can own their own experience, and then they can actually use technology to learn. Online learning is becoming very popular in this side of the world, and it is accessible to a lot, even if they don't have internet. And I saw that in Djibouti, they actually print the content and they study it in groups and they pass the exam, and it really goes very well. And I can say a little bit more on what we do in the areas of leadership when we get to question 2 and 3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Malika. Welcome, Mr. Hanso Tante from Cameroon. Are you with us?
Hey, hello, good day, panelists,
Okay, so
and hello to everyone.
Hi.
Yes, I
so
am
before you
Ansel.
came, okay, you can just move on with your introduction.
Okay, my name is Hansel Tante, and I'm glad to be here among us today. I am many things. First, I'm a husband, I'm a father too, and I have interacted with youths in my country and now in Africa in different platforms. But I have experience in teaching. I'm a peer educator, and my current job, I'm a humanitarian worker, a protection monitor. So I try to identify the human rights violations in my community given the crisis and propose ways through advocacy on improving livelihood within my community. So I'd like to follow from the person who is leading this panel to tell me what next.
Okay. So before you came, we were handling the first question. So it was concerning the ways through which the African youths in particular and youth in general can contribute in developing and taking ownership of an all-inclusive educational policy that addresses societal needs. But before I give you the air, please, I want to remind the panelists that our webinar holds for exactly 2 hours, and we still have a bunch of questions to answer, and I plead with you to be a little bit brief in your answers so that we can be on time. Thank you. So, Mr. Hansel, you have the floor.
All right, thank you very much. I'll try to be brief. I'd like to apologize first again for coming late. Now, when we talk about transforming education, education that can lead to development, it is important that we go back to the basics. What happens at the primary level and even before we get to the secondary level? At the primary level, picking from an example that I know so well, Cameroon, we have a system which does not try to inculcate to the youth what needs to be understood at that level. There's a kind of focus which is geared towards letting the youths, letting the children, or preparing the children for a kind of white collar job which may be oriented towards the government. You see, we have that trend here. And it could be similar, I think, from experience and interactions too. I know that other countries have a similar policy. They don't train the youth. We limit ourselves at youth training to eyeing the white collar jobs. You want to become a lawyer, you want to become a magistrate, you want to do something, become an accountant. Now, we forget something very important, looking at the capitalist nature of our world. Our world is designed such that, unfortunately for us, fortunately for us, we are the productive economy. That's, we must begin by transforming the raw materials because God has blessed us enormously with those raw materials. Now, our training, our education has to be focused on such aspects, the domains of the primary industry, the mining industry, the agricultural industry. Why do I say so? If we focus ourselves on becoming lawyers, we lose focus on what the potential we have, which lies beneath us, and of course, which is in us. Because if we focus on doing the things that we can do to transform a primary industry and make it available for the secondary and even the tertiary, it is that way, it is through that way we can easily develop ourselves. And you can develop yourself by also being able to understand the different phases of that transformation. A good example in point is that in our economy, you would see us importing a lot of things, stuff that we can produce locally. We have, for instance, we import rice, import, it's crazy even nowadays. You see imported maize, you see imported flour from cassava or yam that we produce for plantain. Go around Abushi, say you see those things growing and even getting bad. But the economy makes it such a way, the white man transforms it and sells it back to us. Now, why does that happen? Because we have not trained our children. That is the way. We have trained our children to get white collar jobs. And we look at those things as, okay, maybe for the the poor farmer who has not gone to school. What if our policy from the primary level could be tailored towards that direction, such that our youth, our children grow up knowing that it is possible to build themselves, to develop themselves without relying on an external factor. I think I will stop there for now so that we have time to talk about other things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hansel. Very, very educating from the three panelists that we have. So we will just proceed. So the second question we have for the panelists, one of the challenges to global development is having access to quality education. And according to the United Nations, only 10% of people have completed upper secondary school education in low-income countries. 40% of the global population is not in a language they speak or fully understand, and over 75% of secondary school age refugees are out of school. And it is worthy of note also that there have been gradual, albeit slow, increase in the enrollment of students into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and related courses which will accelerate globally in the few years to come as development continues its course. So, what do you think should be government's focus in ensuring that there is a match between the ability of the students to understand what is being taught and the learning outcomes? In other words, how do we increase learning outcomes, taking cognizance of the diversity of students and their learning abilities? So I'll give the word to Ms. Raquel.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, so just picking up from the, thank you for the flow, and just picking up from the topic that we had, the first question that we just had. I think the key challenge that we're faced with right now is the issue of the quality of our education. Taking the case of Zambia, we are in a phase where we still have the same education system since the time we got our independence, with very few change, with very few significant changes from the where we teach our students to, most importantly, even the way we train our teachers. It's only now, in the case of Zambia, we've been advocating and pushing for a more systematical change in our teachers' colleges, with the introduction of ICT uh, skills to each of the different subjects. So even as a teacher, you are taught these different ICT skills that even when you go into the classroom, you're able to incorporate these skills into your teaching methodology. But that only has a very small bearing on dealing with the mass problem that we are faced with. For instance, right now, in many schools, core schools where you have both girls and boys, there is still a strong stigma which stems from the society to think that subjects that are more inclined to the science, technological, engineering, and mathematics are predominantly male oriented. And this has resulted in us seeing an imbalance with the performance of the girl child in these, what we'd say, STEM subjects today. And this also then later on goes on to manifest itself in the kind of career paths that these students pick. Mainly the girls will find, as many of them might not be able to go into the university and take more or take on the humanitarian and science subjects, and are left to take up more of the TVETA training. There's a big disparity of there's a big challenge in the enrollment of even uh, genders when it comes to the TVETA programs, because many females, despite them wanting to push to empower themselves, are very reluctant to take up TVETA's courses, which are seen to be more male dominant. So the key question is, how do we then deal with this challenge? I feel it streams from our societies. how are we advocating the message of equality in education, equality in picking up courses, and also when it comes to the standard of education that we are offering, how competitive is it to the what we would term as the developed world today? Because in the developed world, the issues of TVETA programs and STEM programs across genders is not something that can be even discussed about because it's not there. But you find in developing countries, as in the case of Zambia, this has proven to be a very strong uh, lagging issue that has held back the participation of the youth, despite their genders, in issues of TVETA and STEM. In my opinion and recommendation, I would think it would be very important that we revise our education system with putting more emphasis on not only the English and the history or geography, but also on the science and mathematics, and create platforms both in the formal system of education and outside the, in the informal system, in which we can create we can advocate for for our youth to be more innovative and come up with different ideas. It could be in form of community competitions. Within the case of Zambia, we have youth centers. And unfortunately, right now, despite the over 50 youth centers that we have across the country, many of these youth centers are not performing to their maximum as they ought to. Challenges being the youth, when they go there, are not funded, so there are no funded activities. So the youth just go there to just meet each other and come up with nothing constructive at the end of their activities there. So why can't we then, as policymakers and even just as policy advocates, as I am myself, look into ways of saying how can we create competitive incentives in the space of TVETA and in the space of STEM to ad- to cultivate an attitude or and a passion for these subjects in our youth today, despite the gender and sexes. Then it also draws us to come to the issue of data. In the Zambian case, we have a challenge of systematical data, which has affected our policy planning and implementation of issues, policies that address these kind of issues. Due to the lack of constant, consistent data collection on the issues of gender, sex, and geographical location to address this challenge, it's very hard for policymakers to come up with policies and even come up with funding for these policies in these areas. So this is also one way that as developing countries, we should also look into how are we collecting our data, how are we processing our data, and most importantly, how are we making this data on issues of STEM and TVETA education and empowerment for our youth and our communities available for implementation and effective results. Okay, I will end there unless there's some questions and I could gladly clarify on those.
All right, thank you, Miss Raquel. So we'll just straightforward and give the floor to Miss Malika so that she can tell us how the government can bridge the issue between this education, youths, and the challenges like taboos. Why should the girls join courses that people think that they can't join? Let us hear from you.
Thank you very much. And I concur with what Raquel said so far. So just add into it, and in it, like for girls' access in STEM, um, I don't think in this part of the world it is a problem. We see, at least in Morocco, 60% of the students in medical schools right now are girls, maybe even to 70% in some engineering schools as well. So that is not a problem. At the opposite, it is very much encouraged, for the simple reason that girls are more focused and then study very well, and are more on top of what they do. I would just want to go back, if you allow me, to the general question itself: how to how to, what do governments, what should the government focus be to ensure that there is a match between the ability of the students to understand and the learning outcomes. And here I can think of the first thing is nutrition. Some of the students go to school without having breakfast, or they don't have lunch, or the program of the government should also have some nutrition component to it. I worked in Mauritius, and I know in Mauritius, when kids get into class, first thing they have is bread and milk and a piece of fruit for every single one to start school. So that puts already the kids in the same level of at least energy to start school, and then to understand what's going on. Second is the teacher's ability to explain and deliver without too much just delivering content, but make sure that the students participate in a way that would, they even can um, explain to each other in sort of like a peer learning, so that they can, those who understand really very quickly certain content can explain to others. And when kids explain to each other, they do it in a way that they actually, it's accessible, the words are accessible. So put it in a learning model that gives a chance to the student to self-learn, accessing the content and doing it on their pace. Either they have a long language problem, or a disability, or just a specific way of learning. That gives them some time to actually adapt their learning to the content. The third is to make sure that the industries exist, so that these kids, when they come out of these studies, STEM studies, they actually get a job. We have in Morocco many PhDs in nuclear something, but we don't have that industry. So they're unemployed, and they're out there just demonstrating in front of the parliament, wanting to work in the government. So when the young kids see them demonstrating and unemployed, they don't get a good image of that discipline at all. It's like, oh, why would I do engineering? Look at all these engineers who don't have a job, and they're just demonstrating. And so that role models also are important. So make sure that there is out, beyond the outcome, that the government in some integrated strategy, they make sure that these students, brilliant they come out of these engineering schools, but they can find a good job, or they can start their own entrepreneurs. Language is a barrier, like we said. In Morocco, school teaches in French, but the government decided years ago that primary, secondary school would be in Arabic for math, sciences, and physics, biology. But what happened is that when they get to university, everything is in French. And when they decided to turn everything into Arabic, the teachers had only 3 months to adapt their content to Arabic, and some of them did not succeed. So we have a broken generation of students that went into the system in one language and had to switch in a complete foreign language once they're at the university. So we call them no language. They don't speak good Arabic, no good French, nor good English. So they just, when they express themselves, you just get lost. Other thing is how we measure success in our schools. When we report to international organizations like UNESCO, so we report on the rate of coverage. Oh, we have 100% children in primary school that are already enrolled. Enrolled how? What are they studying? How many are they in school, in a classroom? That is not captured by the indicators or the success that we want to portray. So we should change these indicators in something that captures the measurements of competencies and learning outcomes, so that schools be more careful in what they report for. Going back to the learning model, I wanted to just add that projects would be one of the best ways that we get our students being closer to nature, to reality, experiment things, do design thinking, identify a problem, work together to solve it, even very, very small problems at early age. And then one last thing I'm thinking about is that why not integrate vocational training before end of high school? It is good that, like for example, in MIT lab, students go in and just spend 6 months to 8 months just building things, be it in carpenter or be it a plumber thing, but that would be something for our kids to do that actually helps them to really visualize what that science thing is, and then maybe be more inclined to embrace these things, be it a girl or a boy, disabled, any other. Even for migrants, we have a lot of migrants here in Morocco coming either from sub-Saharan Africa, from Syria, from Iraq, Yemen, and the problem we have is that we have no matching industries that go with the skills they've learned, and having a problem to actually match them with the possibilities of work. So yeah, that will be my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Malika. Very important information. I know among the participants we have students, we have youth, we have college owners, we have lecturers, we have people from all sorts of life, and this can really be helpful. We also have policymakers. This can really be helpful in bringing the change that we want in the education system of our various countries. So, Mr. Hansel, you have been a lecturer and you have been no, I think right now you are in the field in the humanitarian sector. So, implementation of an all-inclusive educational system could be hampered by an armed conflict. Many people, including women and young girls, have been displaced in places such as the Chad Basin covering Nigeria, Chad and northern Cameroon due to insurgency involving Boko Haram. So what do you think governments across this troubled region could do to ensure that the education of young people, including women and girls, are not affected by armed conflicts?
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Ines. I would begin by commenting a little on what my previous presenter said. They talked about the importance of engineering and mathematics, including girls, and giving them the opportunities as much as the boys. And these are very crucial aspects of developing a society. And now when we talk about inclusive education, we also have to go back a little to the pedagogy that is set forth by the educational system. There are certain systems that present a way that could not help the society in the long run. I'll give you an example. When we talk about, if you look at the curriculum, the history curriculum, for instance, just citing an you have the history curriculum in Cameroon, talking about what happens. Hello?
Yes, we listen.
Okay. We spend a lot of time talking about what happens in the US. You talk about world history, which is necessary, but the focus is a lot on the things that will not help us develop. You see, you will go cramming people's names, you go memorizing people's articles, and the basics about our own culture were neglected. There's which wars did you overcome? Did you fight to settle where you are? Because if you don't understand those things, those basic things, you will not know the history of conflict in your area. And therefore, when conflict comes up, you're just in the flux. You don't know how to solve it. But if you go back to that history, your own history, not the history of other people, not that it's not important, but the focus should be yours first. And secondly, like my previous speakers talked about language. Hello?
Yes.
My previous Miss Ines, is there a problem?
No, we're listening to you.
Okay, so I was talking about the language which could also be a major factor in determining how an educational system develops. Primarily in Africa, our mother tongue is not English or French or one of those languages. We have grown to learn it and are using it in communicating as a lingua franca in many areas. But we must go back to the things that make us who we are. There's a saying that goes, if you speak to someone in another language, you speak to his head, to his mind. But if you speak to a language, you speak to his or her soul, you can be able to bring out the best in the person to make the person develop. So I just wanted to look at that pedagogical aspect that goes to say when the system designs a curriculum, it should take into consideration what we expect of the children tomorrow. Because if you spend time talking to a child about what Woodrow Wilson was or what J.F. Kennedy was, the child grows up knowing more about J.F. Kennedy and not what Kwame Nkrumah did or what Babangida did, for instance, in Nigeria, or what Aijo did, and how you can improve on what those great people, or what Nelson Mandela has achieved, and how you can improve on what they did, so they've done so far. So our focus should be what we want our young people to know. Secondly, all inclusive is a must if we want to develop. There are things that give us development is not necessarily through the formal setting. Why can't we focus on aspects like singing? I like to sing. There are people who make a lot of money in that. What about dancing, work of art, embroidery, tailoring, designing? And what is becoming very popular now is sports. Sports is something that has given us the ability to go through and make Africa has been able to put its name or her name in certain places thanks to sports. We have very big icons that I don't want to start naming them, but developing those talents when they are still young is the way through which we can develop because the individual does what he or she can excel in. Everybody must not go through the formal oh, we go to class on this day, we do this and that. Who at the age of 2, 3, they are given a football, they are given an organ, a piano, they are given instruments, the mic. They start building, and they start drawing from there. And they just do what they love. With what you love, you can be able to develop and develop very fast. Now let me come to the conflict setting. The conflict setting, these skills, these talents of utmost importance. I work in a situation, not in the southwest region of Cameroon, where schools have not been going on for the past 3 years. And unfortunately, it's going to continue for the short run. We hope it stops as soon as possible. You have actors in the in Cameroon who are making sure that it's unclear what the gain is. Some schools of thought hold it that they are drawing attention of the government and the international community to the plight of the Anglophones. But we see that the children's future for 3 years have been on hold. They cannot attend any school. Time or a system that values children can be learning something. And this brings me back to what I said previous. Work of arts involved in things that at the end of the conflict, we hope that sooner than later, they will be able to use what they have gained to make themselves responsible and integrate themselves into society. Conflict, let me just end with this. Conflict is one of the most devastating things that could happen to a community. It stops everything. You can't even be talking about school because there's no security. You can't even talk about business because there's no security. Nothing seems to function. Nothing appears to work. And in this kind of system, the only hope you have is that natural talent that God has given to your generation. And those who are around that generation can help bring them up, teach them new things, make them develop themselves so that the community will still grow, even if the conflict persists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hansel, for the insight on how to educational growth in armed conflict. So, Mrs. Raquel, I know you are a policy analyst. Undoubtedly, having the right policy across the continent could actually accelerate an all-inclusive educational system, we all agree, in order to drive sustainable development. Nevertheless, it's quite challenging to come to a conclusion in putting the right policies in place, sometimes because of a budgetary constraint. So, in your opinion, what should governments across the continent do in order to overcome the challenge of budget constraint, given Africa's increasing youth population and the urgent need to provide access to quality education?
All right, thank you very much. Um, I think one key issue that every government and every policymaker needs to put in front of them to understand is, why is it important for us to invest in our education system? What are the consequences of not investing in uplifting and improving the quality of education that our nations and their communities are receiving at the moment? Once decision makers have been able to critically look at this question and answer it, they would easily see that education is the bedrock of any nation's development today. And keep in mind, when I say education, I do not only refer to the formal form of education, but also considering the impact and the contribution that the different forms of education do play to the development of any society today. When it comes to the issue of budgeting, this is a challenge that in the Zambian space we have experienced in and have had manifest in different forms, from ranging to poor infrastructure in rural communities, hence very huge downfall and turnout of of students going to school because there is no infrastructure. And mind you, these are areas in which, if when the rain season comes, you find the little structure that was placed up by the community, which is mainly by thatch, will quickly be washed away and even blown away. And you find the district commissioners would say they don't have money to fix these infrastructures. Hence, you find even when you deploy teachers to such areas, they don't want to go there. So even the quality of teachers that we have is affected simply because there is no deliberate effort by decision makers to ensure that a very quantitative and all-inclusive budget for education is directed to the different education sectors, ranging from primary school, secondary school, to even tertiary school. We have adopted, since the MDGs have adopted the free education policy that was adopted by many other African countries as part of their MDG goal commitments. But the key challenge is even through that free education, the quality of education that is being received is not of standard to compete with the developing world that we are faced with today. Worse, when it comes to tertiary education and university education, many young people are not able to even afford that, and hence they do not. A very small number are able to even go to universities and colleges because they cannot afford it. So really, what's the way out of this would be simply be to recognize and acknowledge that education affects the attainment of the different SDG goals that we have today. Without education, the innovation is affected, good health is affected, issues of poverty is affected, even peace and security of a country is affected, because when you have people who are not able to access the basic need of education, it creates a lot of friction and strife within the community. Well, when it comes to the issue of budgeting, there are different uh, alternatives that a system could look into doing. Recently in Zambia, we have the Ministry of Education being the mother body of all forms, the different uh, levels of education, has been taxed by the government to look into ways of outsourcing funds to support the ministry and its different structures. And how is this being done? By adopting the PPP approach to funding, the private public sector approach. Zambia has a striving and growing private sector. And as a private sector, every bit, both the local private sector and even in the investors, they all have a responsibility to give back to the communities that they are operating in. So right now, this framework and policy is still on the drawing board. It hasn't yet been implemented, but for us, it's offering a solution to deal with the challenge of funding due to the budget. Being a country that depends mainly on export of copper, and that for the past 6 years has 6 years plus has witnessed a steep fall in the price of copper on the international market, hence affecting the economic and social uh, activities in the country in terms of revenue. This offers a solution in which the Ministry of Education has to take up the burden to not only look at the government as a general body to fund its educational projects, but also look into other ways to find partners to fund the project. So, for instance, we're looking at working with international universities to do partnerships. How can the University of Zambia be able to partner with, let's say, the University of Cape Town in South Africa? Well, how can we collaborate on courses and also find ways of meeting halfway on costs? Not only is it going to ensure that the quality of education is competitive, not only for the Zambian youth, but even that a young person who is in Zambia can be able to reach the standard of qualification of that in South Africa or in any other part of the world. But it also ensures that even the institutional reforms in our education system are attained. Because through these partnerships, the institutions are forced to do a facelift and to go and redo the curriculum and the subjects that are being offered to ensure that they meet the international standards today. We're also looking and working with institutions like the National Geography of the World uh, uh, organizations to see how best we can create partnerships that will be able to address and meet into the budget where the government is failing today. And another key way of ensuring that the budget funds that are directed towards the education system are allocated to that is how best then do we ensure that we adopt and employ tight accountability measures. For a long time, we have seen a lot of money going into the ministries, including the Ministry of Education, and yet not being able to produce results that way or that the money was allocated for. Issues of accountability need to be put into question. So if it means that we do open up to say we have a public census of reports, of auditing of reports, that has to be done each year. At the end of the year, when the national budget is being read out, ministries such as the health and education should be able to produce an audited report on what has been done with the money that was allocated to them in the previous budget at the close of every national year. The issue of enhancing the quality of living for the teachers is very key also to ensuring that as we send our teachers out there, there ought to be a budget. Teachers should not wait 3 to 5 months for a salary to come through, because the moment you delay in the salaries of teachers, it also compromises the quality and the commitment of their work to the students and to the work. We've had instances where you find because of the uh, the delayed dispersal of salaries, teachers have resorted to selling the textbooks that the ministry has given to the school. Or even worse, for those students who are in exam classes, teachers end up selling the exam paper before the exam as leakages in order to finance their needs. So this is something that is very important, and it falls down not only to the government, but the responsibility also falls down to the ministry and the different educational district offices to say how best can we look into the issue of ensuring efficient budgets, efficient funds towards the education, towards schools, towards teachers, and towards even programs within the districts to ensure that the quality of education in our country, in our nation, in our continent does not go down, but is able to be improved on and build up to compete internationally with the rest of of the world. I will end there for now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Raquel. I hope we are all still concentrating on listening to the important information we're getting from the webinar. So a little reminder, participants, if you have any questions or contributions, please you just type it in the chat center and panelists will address it at the end of their personal presentations. Okay, so Ms. Malika Lazri, you have worked in a lot of developmental organizations, you have carried out developmental projects. You have worked in countries like Cameroon, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, and Morocco as well. And you have so much experience in youth development through education. So, what will you suggest as the learning points garnered from your continent-wide journey countries in Africa could learn, especially in formulating and implementing an all-inclusive educational policy?
Um, Thank you very much for this question. It is actually indeed very very important, but also really very challenging to tackle it because when we talk about Africa, we forget that it's 54 countries and so many regions, and there is low rate of integration. So um, it is really difficult to say. So this is a recipe for every African country, um, at least when it comes to education. And according to the UN or UNESCO, there are four categories of countries when judging by how education is inclusive. So there are the countries that are achieved. If you have read the Facing Forward, that has been developed last year, the book, the World Bank and the Agence Française de Développement. So there is so the achieved countries like Mauritius, like South Africa, there are the emerged countries, emerging countries, and the delayed countries. And unfortunately, some of the West African countries are among the delayed countries where the need the kids who are out of school, out of the system of school, are the highest, and very poor policies to actually reintegrate everyone into the system. So some of the lessons would run from basic um, government initiatives to really very strategic and strengthening. So the basic ones is to just ensure to students what I have mentioned in the beginning, so that to encourage them to first of all access, and the second to state the retention rate also, that is very much also if the government ensures that the infrastructure is equitable, if the quality of education and it comes through the teacher and the content or the curricula is adequate, if the language is understood to the student, if the class size is adequate as well, if the textbooks are available, they don't need to be all of them in very colorful, although it's really helpful for the imagination of the students, especially at an early age. But at least textbooks would be available in class. If government can also hasten partnership with NGOs and donors to bring in new lessons learned from other successful countries, like the ones we call the achieved, and then implement them like projects, like how to play and build something, like design thinking as well. Um, if if the government can ensure that schools have toilets, have access to water, have access to electricity, and I mean we have the most abundant resources is the sun, is so we can have solar energy. If we invest in these things, I think we can say that at least half of the problem would have been solved, and the parents have the confidence to send their kids. Now we can work on issues that are related to culture, for girls education, for maybe accessibility to handicapped children, for refugees, the special case of refugees, so that the government gives them um, access or the right to access schools. It took the highest level of leadership here in Morocco, the king himself, who gave that authority, who gave that permission and authorization to children to access schools and the parents also to access any other social services, including access work opportunities, equal work opportunities with Moroccans. So if we can do that, I think that that is already a basic that can these governments do to out of respect to human beings, to these children to go to school and to exercise their right to education. Second level would be to the excellence itself. The second level is to see this education, it's not just getting the masses into education school, but to make sure that these students, when they come out of the system, have access to a means to build a career, make a living, and live up to their potential. If I may just cite in this regard the model we have at the African Leadership University, because that's a new model. It's yes, tertiary education or the last 2 years of high school, but it can inspire some of us or some of the decision makers at the government level to actually reorient the education models and make them more, if I may say, outcome driven, learning outcome driven, than what they are right now. So the learning model is based on identifying the skills that are needed for children or for young people to come up to the working world and then access jobs. So leading others would be not only at work but even in clubs, in playing on the ground. To lead others and be able to be part of a team and work in a team and work in a group is one of the qualities that a human being needs to foster since childhood till adulthood. Second of all is to have some entrepreneurial thinking, think outside the box and then come up with ideas and solutions to day-to-day problems. The third one is to have some critical reasoning, be able to question things and not just follow like an army thing, but be able to question orders, be able to question rules and regulations, use some data even at a certain level to say, okay, well, logic says this, and why would we do that? Lead itself is something that is really crucial. It's to know itself, its pluses and minuses, weaknesses and strength, and build on that to actually choose one's path. Communication for impact, to be able to communicate, to acknowledge an audience, to be able to caliber the voice and then deliver a story or deliver a message, express oneself, express the feelings. That is also, these skills are very, very crucial. And be able to manage complex tasks, be able to plan, be able to organize, to coordinate. These are all key characteristics of success in terms of output of learning. So the way we do it at ALU or ALA is through a four-stage or four-step model. It starts with discovery. Discover the student is put in a situation where he or she discovers what they don't know. So there are things they don't know, but they know that they don't know them. But there are things that they don't even know they don't know. So we put them in situation, either case studies or a game or whatever, and then they discover that they don't even know they don't know something. After that, we send them through the platform to some self-work. Self-work, it's designed so that each student learns using his pace. Those who like to watch movies can watch like a webinar or something to learn. Those who like to listen do so. Those who like to read articles or read books do so. So there's a big choice of how to learn more about what they didn't know, just by themselves. After that, the learning model goes to peer work, that they come into groups. The groups are a mix of doers, thinkers, and so on. And then they get together and they compare notes, and they try those who didn't understand something and get information from the others. And after that, it closes with a workshop with the facilitators. So teachers, we call them facilitators because we just believe that content or knowledge is in everyone's mind, or it's accessible fast. So what we do as facilitators is just to ask as many questions as possible so that there is consciousness of the answer by the student. And this is how things stay, and the student learns how to learn himself or herself. And the leadership development, we do it also in three terms. The virtue is to, for a kid to be a leader, is how leaders, it's to know how he or she conducts herself and have a value, so that what is, even when learning, when studying, it's the optic to help and bring a value to the community, to him herself, to the group, to the school, to the organization that they belong in, and be self-sustained. And the last one is to be visionary also. It's to just not stop at learning how to read, write, math, but to say, okay, where is this taking me? How can I impact more people? How can I impact my community? How can I impact my continent? So that's basically how it would run. It's a backward design, going from where we want these leaders to be, or our students to land, and then planning backward what they need. First basic structures, infrastructures, then actually nurturing their minds and their intelligence with very entrepreneurial and very innovative ways of solving the challenges, but also coming with a better way to live and help their community prosper. That's my contribution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Malika Lazri. So at this point, we'll take a break and give the floor to some participants to give their contributions or questions. A little reminder, we have 19 minutes left before we close our webinar. So I'll give the floor to Tombi from South Africa. Please be brief enough so that we can be on time. A contribution or a question. We are listening to you. You present yourself and the country where you come from. And if you're a YALDA member, please to which branch you belong. Thank you. Tombi, you have the floor.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Hey, Tombi.
Oh, all right. Thank you, people and leaders, for this platform. And well, for me, I think the most important thing is how do we as youth ensure that our influence is stemmed? How do we participate within the educational system? Because I see that most of the educational systems is something that has been fed by us in Africa and sold to our leaders. However, today, as educators, as community leaders, we are seeing the mistake perhaps that was done, or the loopholes within the systems. However, the biggest challenge is how do we ensure that our ideas are taken seriously, and we are partaking in the policies that are taking place in the correct platforms like your UNESCO and many others within our different countries. And when it comes to the development of the child, I believe that nutrition and health plays a very vital role, and that is something that has been neglected within the system. But how do we include that now? Because what happens is in South Africa, I know we used to have agriculture as a subject. We used to have history as a subject, which was removed post apartheid, and we through the whole transition. But how do we go back to that? And another point is also the Industrial Revolution. Most of us, we're from rural communities, but how do we make sure that in this technology growth that is happening in the world, how do we bridge the gap between the have and the have nots? Because we know that end of the day, South Africa in a whole, it's the one that suffers and bears the consequences of all the systematic changes that are happening in the world. Because they're saying that, I know in South Africa, the fourth industrial revolution has been embraced, in particular by our president. But the challenge is, how do we include that in the education system with the educators that are not techno savvy, we never receive any technological training? And how do we give tablets to kids when they cannot be fed properly? So I would like to know from your countries that how can we unite as Africans so that our voice is heard and our contributions matter in the whole system? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tombi from South Africa. So, amongst the three panelists, any volunteer to address her points?
Can I go first?
Okay, Raquel.
All right. Toby, thank you so much for that. Sorry, you're saying something, Hansel? Okay, so I'll say, Toby, thank you very much for those.
You first,
You brought,
ma'am. Sorry.
Toby, you brought three very important aspects and areas that we cannot go ignored. It's through the issue of educating the educators. While I was putting this together from my personal experience, is I was wondering, it's very common for us to hear of exchange programs being done in the education space that focuses on having students being exposed to different advanced systems and also just knowledge, advanced knowledge from be it from one continental university or even international university. But very rarely, if close to none, do we hear of our lecturers, our students, our teachers undergoing these very same exchange programs, which leaves the students at a big loss. Because imagine you have a student at a college or a university or even a secondary school having the opportunity to go out there for an exchange program, be there for 3 to 6 months, come back to the university or the school that they were, let's just say the institution that they were at, and find that the teacher who's teaching them is not even knowledgeable of the information that this child or this student has been exposed to. So it is very important that as uh, as institutions of education, we consider the importance of empowering and adding value to our instructors. It is very important. There is no excuse to it, but luckily in today's world, we have online programs, and I feel like it should when we're looking at restructuring our education system and the policies that we have around the structure, we should also not only take into consideration how we need to change subjects or how we need to change the syllabus, but we also need to see how best do we also empower the educator. What programs do we deliberately pick out that we see are useful for their own benefit and also for the kind of results that they produce when they're before our students and teaching them. So how then can we do this? Institutions and the Ministry of Education need to be able to deliberately work with other other universities who and see what kind of programs are they adopting to expose their educators towards, and see how they can best adopt it into their own system to also empower the educator as they are changing the syllabus, changing the curriculum, and also exposing their students to these different advanced methods of learning or even just educational environments. And secondly, the issue of food, health, and this is nutrition and health is key to the learner. This is very true. Unfortunately, in the Zambian case, this is one area where the issue of funding from the ministry was had to cut down this issue of feed. How do we feed the children before they go to class? And it has affected it has affected the attendance and participation of our students in primary and secondary school massively. Whereas if they're coming from homes that cannot even afford a meal for the home itself, you you find such students end up dropping out completely from their classes and their school, and hence leaving us is a large number of uneducated young people who are adding on to the number of people living under the poverty line in our communities. I think the other question I could leave it to the other two presenters to tackle, or if anybody wants to even add on to the other two that I have covered, please feel free.
Okay, let me take it from there. And just to say something very important about technology, we have spent quite some time in Africa talking about bridging the technological gap, which is important. But what is more fundamental is solving the problems in our communities. Now, what would you do to a child? What will happen if you give a child a tablet and give the child Wi-Fi connection and everything that goes with it? And the child is unable to live from one community to the next through a distant road. The child is unable to go to school. The child is unable to have food to eat. I mean, the basic things. Is that what we should focus on? I'm not saying technology is not important. I'm just saying that sometimes we get carried away with the popular discussion, the popular discourse, that we forget the essential. And the essential that I see in our communities is that we don't have water, good water to drink. We can't even operate technology properly if we don't have electricity. We don't have good roads. We don't have good business because we produce a lot of things good food. We can transport to the nearby markets, which is an urban center. So it has local, act global. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Raquel and Mr. Hansel, for your contributions. And Mrs. Tombi, I hope it is clear enough and for everyone else. So please, before we proceed, I would like to remind everyone, including the panelists, to from time to time go through the chat center. We won't be able to give the chance to everyone to talk about his question or his contribution. So please, there are some contributions in the chat center that everyone should read and go through, as well as some questions which panelists could answer. So now I will give the floor to Mr. Donald Nabiswa. You had something interesting in the chat center, and I propose that you speak about it. You have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Ines. So I would like to begin by saying that the webinar is going on well and I like it. Yeah, I would like to give a case study of what happened here in Kenya. Over a long period of time, like a lot of university graduates used to have been churned out of the universities, just for doing a limited number of courses, let's say engineering, doctors, teachers. So you find a few fields are overcrowded, and there are not enough job opportunities for the youths to take up. And so this leaves other sectors of the economy where with inadequate number of professionals. And so what the government did is to go back to the drawing board. And just yesterday, on Friday, like a new curriculum was launched. It's called the competence-based curriculum, where now the focus will be not just on those subjects that are learned at school, but they look at the students overall. They look at what talents they have with sports, if it's let's say art, and these other things, singing, so that they capture those talents at an early age and try to nurture them and see how they can incorporate those things into how they can formalize them and and remove the attention just from the white collar jobs and stuff like that. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to contribute about uh, is is that the interest in sciences and mathematics needs to be nurtured from an early age. You know, if you don't nurture this thing from an early age and then expect that someone will go to secondary school, then it's when you start to focus on the sciences and maths. It will be a very difficult task. So I think if the education system can start to inculcate this interest in this science and subject and math subjects from an early age, it will go a long way to help improve the performances here in our countries in Africa. So that's basically my contribution. And, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Donald, for your contribution. I will now give the floor to Goy Tsamang Majaga. Please pardon me if I don't pronounce your name correctly. It's quite challenging. So, Goy Tsamang Majaga from Botswana, you have the floor. Okay, I think he's off for now, but when he comes back, we'll give him the floor. So, I will direct this question to Mrs. Malika Lazrim. Could you explain innovative learning models that the African Leadership Group has been working on?
Sure. I actually have just explained it when I went through it, but I can go again, and it answers also the question that the gentleman has wrote in his chat on soft skills. So the African Leadership University's 3-year program starts with one core foundation year that is built in soft skills. No other thing is taught. So no majors, nothing. So the students go through 8 months of studying project management. They're studying data and decisions. They're studying communication for impact and entrepreneurial leadership. These 4 courses, in any content of the courses, try to instill and build competencies that I have talked about. The critical reasoning, the data analysis, the problem solving, leading self, leading others, working in teams, communicating, and so on. So these are all the soft skills that are surveyed from 150,000 employers in Africa who said, my next batch of people I want to recruit in 5 years or so should have these skills. So the first year then was built to allow the students to acquire the skills through the 4 courses I have just mentioned. Project management, it's because that's how the work area actually starts to design and implement the work to reach the objectives. But at the same time, we teach them also entrepreneurial leadership, because the entrepreneurial leadership, like in Morocco, for example, the economy creates 20,000 to 30,000 jobs per year net. And the schools let go 450,000 graduates. So there is no way that 20,000, 30,000 jobs would satisfy the need of positions of hundreds of thousands of students coming out of school. So the solution is entrepreneurship. These kids have to develop themselves their own job, create their own job, or create enterprises that actually create jobs for others. Unfortunately, the growth rate in most of African countries is still very, even though it's 5-6%, but it's still very low to generate enough jobs to satisfy the need or the demand in terms of the graduates. Knowing that only 10% to 15% of the students who go through the school make it to tertiary education. So going back to the learning model itself, so then, like I said, the teacher is a facilitator, is not like someone who comes and transmits the knowledge. We make sure that a discovery session is done with the facilitator so that the student discovers what he or she doesn't know she didn't know. And then after that, they do self-work on a platform and according to their pace also and how they want to learn. So they read about the subject. They come into groups, peers, usually of 5, depending different profiles, so that they can complement each other. And then they do some exercises and work to better understand the content. And then we workshop the whole thing, applying it to Airbnb or applying it to a real life company that has a challenge and is in contact with the university, and then work on their problems and suggest solutions. So this is the learning model. The first year is to build up competencies, to build up soft skills, leadership skills, give tools, and then students get a chance also to choose their major if they want to go into business, or they want to go into electrical engineering, or they want to go into computer sciences. Or we have a major that's called global challenges, that are the challenges of Africa, be it in infrastructure, urbanism, or urbanization, education, healthcare, conservancy. So all these, that's one major that's innovative. It's unique in itself that African Leadership University offers. So I don't know if this answers the question of the participant, and then your question. If not, I can elaborate a little bit more. I just don't want to take too much time.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Malika. So I just want Mr. Hansel to conclude the webinar for us with this last question. As a lecturer and a mentor, what specific challenges do you see impeding the youth that you work with?
Okay, that's a difficult one because you were expecting me to try to point out faults of others. A person, being a man who has a lot of faults, I don't see how that is going to be very productive. But let's try to identify what all youths, including myself, what we face in developing ourselves and in trying to grow. The first thing I've observed is that a number of youths do not know what they want. You ask youths at different levels, different stages of their academic career, or you ask them, what do you want to become? Even right up to the university level, you can see a young man or a young woman studying nursing, which is already professional enough. If you ask that person, what do you want to do with this? And you get from the response that it's just to fulfill an obligation that I will get a job somewhere and do something. Now, when study, when education It's not designed to get some achievement from the individual and respond to a particular need in society. That educational system reviewed, or the individual must rethink about the first problem, like I've said, is that of people just doing things because others are doing it, or just to say, my family wants me to become a medical doctor, I'm doing medicine. And that orientation. The second thing which I've observed is that even for those who have go through a certain path, they lack to push themselves through. Let me give you examples. I've talked to some young people who have already identified a career path, and they are almost at the level of getting school, like some young barristers, law, that left the law school, and from the law school they are there ready to integrate into the bar and start work. But when I say lack of courage, they look at the achievements of those who have been there for a long time, and they find it difficult to start from the beginning. That start begins with different occupations or with different professions in different ways. The most common way, especially in our context, depending on where you find yourself, could be to do what we call vocational or sorry, not vocational training, volunteering skills. Apart from entrepreneurship, which is depending on what you do, if you are in a certain sector, you have to volunteer. Most employers go out asking for certain skills, certain years, of a number of years of work experience, and our young people find themselves to volunteer, bring out the best in us. And if we don't do that, it's difficult. So at my level, I would want to limit it at those very, let me not go to the private things I've observed, but these are general things I've noticed in my mentoring experience, that the first is we don't have looking for clear in our minds. Second thing is even when we have it, we're not courageous enough to go through. And the third thing is we don't want to sacrifice our time for nothing. We should be able to give our time. One of my mothers told me that if you are not used up and someone uses you to make money for himself or herself, you cannot grow. So our young, it's a policy, it's unfortunate, it's and that's what we live in. Someone has to use what is happening and concentrate on the skills you are gaining at the time. Then when you get the skills, you can start making money for yourself. And that is how we can develop ourselves as African youths. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hansel Tante from Cameroon. Thank you very much, Mrs. Rutendo Raquel from the Zambia. And thank you very much, Ms. Malika Lasri from Morocco. Thank you to all the participants from all over the globe. Thank you for your time and for being so organized and respectful, muting your mics, everyone. Thank you very much. So we have come to the end of the YALDA August 17th webinar. We should have in mind that we are all development actors from our various spheres of societies. As such, we have to transform education, making it relevant, equitable, and inclusive. as well as promoting lifelong opportunities for all youths. Africa counts on us, no matter your role, be it a medical doctor, a lecturer, an agricultural guy, a STEM guy, or whatsoever. We are the people that Africa needs in order to have the change that we need. So, sorry for those who are sending in their questions at this moment. We are quite done. So, I wish everyone the best. Thank you very much and have a nice evening ahead.
Thank you, Ines. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ines. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, African youths. And keep growing, keep inspiring yourselves.
Thank you very much to everybody who took the time to join us on this pertinent discussion. And thank you once again to the YALDA Cameroon chapter for offering us this platform to express and share and grow towards the sustainable attainment of our goals and development in the space of education across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.
This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.